After 2 years with a small, well-defined group of frontrunners, F1 Academy's 2026 season is about as wide open as it gets. Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. Our favorite female racing series is back, and naturally we need to talk about the rather open state of this year's title fight, along with the conclusion of the Spanish Winter Championship and the Formula Winter Series, Kimi Antonelli's maiden F1 victory, and the first look at the Arlington street circuit on the road to Indy. So let's get straight to it. We'll start with the Formula Winter Series, where the season ended with an ominous sign for the summer. Dries van Langendonk, after already securing the title last time out, put in his best weekend to date by completely dominating all three races. Once again, his wet weather form was especially remarkable on the Saturday, but he was still completely untouchable on the dry Sunday as well. At this point, it really feels like we're already waiting for next year to see him in faster equipment. British F4 really seems like a bit of a formality at this stage. A couple other things deserve a mention though. First off, Arie Bansel costing himself P2 in the championship by stalling from the front row in race 1. An unfortunate error, but Bansel is still clearly looking at Italian F4 as either a title contender or at the very least the ace driver of us racing. Thomas Behrmann, I suppose, is in a similar position for Van Amersfoort, though realistically I do of course see the true title challengers over in the Prema camp. Last week we were wondering whether George Proudfoot Nalder could keep up his debut form, and in many ways he did even better this time around with a strong podium in the second race. Sure, he did get help from some Rodin drama between Alfie Slater and Ethan Lennon ahead. Rodin was the team to beat this weekend after all, but a podium is a podium, especially in your second ever F4 weekend. Good on him, let's wait and see where he appears in the summer. Last but not least, we shall return to the story of Arjen Kraling. After he got his maiden win at Valencia, I said let's see if this helps him get closer to his own potential, like we see so often in karting and the lower ranks in car racing. That first win in a category can do wonders for a young driver's confidence. And in the case of Kraling, it appears to have done just that. Going from inconsistent and a bit too scrappy to scoring in 5 out of 6 remaining races after, and from all sorts of positions as well. A big step forward no doubt, and I'd expect this to carry over into the regular season as well. The E4 portion of the Spanish Winter Championship did end with the expected no Monteiro title. His advantage was just a little too large. And to add insult to injury for fellow campus sophomore Vivek Kanfan, the American got absolutely wrecked by penalties that ended up costing him a top 3 in the championship. Instead, we did get something that I wish we could have during the regular season, though we most likely won't. Nathan Tighe and Andrej Petrovic, third-year veterans but driving for underdog teams, taking P2 and P3 in the title battle is quite special. Of course, it is a super short season, but let's just enjoy it anyway. Another feature that I'd love to see continue in the regular season is Casper Schormans actually just about beating Rocco Coronel to the rookie title on countback. Keeping in mind that Coronel did have a minor experience advantage coming in, and this is an excellent look for Schormans. Taking his maiden win in the reverse grid was really just a cherry on top. Unlike DriveX and Technicars sustaining a title fight, this Schormans versus Coronel fight for supremacy at MP actually has a decent chance of continuing in the summer, so that is definitely one to watch. And of course, we can't end this season without talking about Luna Flusha again. She may not have been able to relive the same highs from round 1, but has shown pretty good pace and, more importantly, a rare combination of looking racy and yet sensible at the same time, and so far her incident record speaks for itself. She might not exactly be a title contender, but this was easily the best rookie campaign from a girl in recent memory. Keanu Azhari did cruise to the title in the E3 portion of the championship, so once again, let's see what we can and what we can't take away from this short championship for the regular season. Keanu Azhari and Hitech are coming in as favourites, but a lot can happen still in that dynamic. It is new cars for everyone after all, and there are lots of good rookies on the grid compared to the more experienced Azhari. If Hitech remains at the top, Azhari will have an easy time considering the incident-prone nature of his teammates, which I doubt they can sort out in time for a title attack. But Between Polo Motorsport, MP and Campos, there is more than enough competition on the team's front that I'd expect to rise to the occasion, leaving James Segozzi as another big-time title player. I also wouldn't count out the rookies, though we have by now seen a dividing trend among the top four. René Lammers and Alex Palou are the clear top rookies and are probably going to be the top drivers for MP and Campos respectively, while Ian Eichmans and Thomas Strouven have had more issues producing results. But Eichmans especially has still been absolutely rapid, so I won't count him out either. Among the other returning drivers in the top teams, I really struggle to see any proper title attack except for maybe Enzo Tanvanitschko. The Red Bull Junior has finally scored his first win of the year and second in the category in pretty dominant fashion this weekend. But as we've discussed a few weeks ago, I do really think anything other than being well in the title fight has to be considered an underperformance. And I don't know if he has that in him. I'd bet on Alex Powell any day in that matchup. It was rather one-sided back in karting, mind you. And finally, a spotlight on one of the rookies we've not mentioned at all so far. Brazilian F4 champion Heitor Dallagnol, who has been quietly impressive so far this year. His results may look mediocre, but they do not tell the full story in the pace department, and he has had quite a few good attacking drives as well so far. Between him and Rafael Parad, Palou has secured the two surprise packages among the rookies. Or is the team just that good? Guess we'll find out soon enough. F1 Academy is finally back, and I am quite glad to say this year's season opener was considerably cleaner than the disaster from last year, though we did still have more than a few clumsy errors in the second race in particular. The title battle is about as wide open as I had expected. Between Emma Felbermeier, Alicia Pomowski and Nina Gardeman, 3 of the 5 strong sophomores have started their year right. This is of course especially true for Felbermeier, both able to charge in the reverse grid and take a controlled win in the feature, her first one of those I might add. Goes without saying that she is my personal favourite, so I'm quite excited about how all of that played out. I will admit though, if I had to name a single favourite for the title, I probably would have landed on her Rodin teammate Ella Lloyd. The McLaren affiliated driver did have a slightly underwhelming weekend, but to be fair, she did make the most of what she had post-qualifying, and it was far from a terrible opening weekend. Alba Larsen would be the 5th and final of the big sophomore contenders in my book, and she did show it with magnificent pace at the start of the reverse grid, only to ruin it with an over-eager move. Little disappointing considering we are still waiting for her first podium, but to be fair, these are the sorts of mistakes we'd expect from 17-year-olds. That's what they are here to learn after all. She clearly has some talent in the pace department. All in all, these 5 are clearly all here with some title ambitions and have got the teams behind them to fight for it as well. Who are your favourites at this early stage of the year? My head says Ella Lloyd, but my heart very much wants Emma Felbermeier, so I suppose I've got Rodin on top either way. Looking at the rookies, Peyton Westcott really built on her late season form and hit the ground running here, including a neat podium in the feature. I personally believe that there are too many strong returning drivers for a rookie to truly get involved in the title battle, but Westcott looks like the best bet to prove me wrong so far. Lisa Billard was about what I expected. I have come to accept that she maybe isn't quite as great as I thought a few years ago, but still such a lovable character to cheer for and surely a regular in the points this season, and the perfect candidate for reverse grid wins later down the line. Finally, Natalia Granada was easily the biggest surprise of the year so far. I'll be honest, I knew her name before, but always kinda overlooked her. She just never really stood out beyond her Iron Dames affiliation. But of course, there's a reason she is on this grid, and to see her put it P2 on debut was pretty stunning. It wasn't just her first F1 Academy race, mind you, it was her first ever car race in front of the huge Grand Prix audience. If anything, she has shown that she's got nerves of steel that well exceed her experience. I've explained why I don't believe in a rookie title contender, but I'd expect Granada to make life difficult for Westcott in the Prema intra-team battle. For this week's F1 segment, I couldn't do anything other than a bit of a Kimi Antonelli love letter, could I? Watching him win those back-to-back European karting titles before dominating right out the gate in F4 got me so excited that just sharing it with my few racing interested mates wasn't cutting it anymore, which was a major reason for starting this channel, spreading the word of Kimi Antonelli before he had the big F2 spotlight on him. Watching him take his first F1 win in such convincing fashion felt like watching him enter a new chapter. I had zero doubts he'd end up becoming an F1 race winner. Now it is time to start fighting for his very first championship. And the good thing is, in my opinion, he has nothing to lose this year. He has already shown that he can keep up with Russell enough for an easy Mercedes 1-2, provided the dynamics between the teams don't shift later down the line. But Antonelli is improving quickly, and no matter what mistakes he makes along the way, they do not seem to affect him mentally. So all the ingredients are there to at least keep the season interesting for us, even if it stays the Mercedes show. And of course, we also get plenty of entertainment from the Ferrari wheel-to-wheel battle. Honestly, some of the best racing in years from a purely visual perspective. Lewis Hamilton looking considerably more comfortable in this year's car and proving it with his first podium in red really just completed a weekend that either had feel-good stories or utter disasters like for Verstappen and McLaren with nothing in between. Say what you want about the current regulations, this season has been very fun so far. Over in the US, we've had the first ever weekend at the Arlington Street Circuit, and while I thought it was generally a surprisingly good track, it did make for a really tough to read field in the USF Pro 2000s. A new difficult track and a bunch of drivers that might not even run the Pro 2000s as their full season program means we still don't know all that much about how this year will play out. The one thing we know for certain is that USF 2000 champ Jack Jeffers is here to fight. Yeah, an unprompted spin did cost him big time in race 1, but he was clearly a top 2 runner in terms of pace. And his main competitor, USF Juniors champ Leo Scorpioni, might not even be here to fight him for the title. Technically, I think he is supposed to run in the USF 2000s, though this weekend's performance might change his mind. Should he do so, we might get a really rookie-heavy title battle this year. Of course, we've got the experienced karting star Frankie Mossman leading the championship so far, but it did take mistakes from both Scorpioni and Jeffers to get there, not necessarily something to build an entire season on. Historically, Mossman has struggled to string a season together. In between weekends like this, he tends to have way too many off weekends, so unless he shows significant progress in that area, I struggle to see him sustain a title campaign. Finally, we've had a surprising highlight. Spanish F4 and Eurocup 3 graduate Andres Cardenas has moved to the US, and despite some issues in the racecraft department, he has shown good speed right out the gate and was pretty clearly the bright spot for JHDD. He has had some good moments throughout his European career, just never quite enough to be the title contender we had expected at times. So maybe this change of scenery is all he needs. It certainly looked quite promising. The IndyNXT race was unfortunately rather short, but we could still learn a thing or two from it. Most importantly, Max Taylor was easily the class of the field by a huge margin this weekend. Not only was he miles quicker than anyone else, he also brought his trademark super aggressive, pushy style of driving, really wringing the car's neck to get some of these overtakes done. All in all, just a treat to watch. Again, similarly to Kimi, I can't believe that we've talked about his first few win attempts in the juniors on this channel just a few short years ago. Otherwise, the championship really appears to be wide open, as this time we've had Enzo Fittipaldi lead large parts of the race and Alessandro Di Tullio put it on pole before getting taken out by Timmy Garchik in T1. Considering both Fittipaldi and Di Tullio didn't have the St. Pete's they were probably expecting, this was an important immediate bounce back. Particularly in Fittipaldi's case, who had certainly been paying close attention to Dennis Hauger's run last year and surely thought he might be able to pull something similar off himself. Shout out for Jack Beaton. Not only did he qualify a lot better than expected and actually gave me a little bit of hope for this campaign, he also followed it up with one of the more hilarious jump starts I've ever seen, just something for a quick laugh before we move on. In IndyCar, the biggest show at the surprisingly good Arlington Street Track, the Sunday was all about Andretti. The team showed up looking almost ridiculously dominant. To put it into perspective, they didn't just have all 3 cars in the top 4, they did it with big gaps to the rest. despite repeated issues in the pits with wheel guns not working and poor traffic management on release, at least for willpower. Nevertheless, only Alex Palou was able to put up a fight at all, and even he couldn't stop the flying street track master that is Carl Kirkwood. Looking at the bigger picture, this not only hands Kirkwood the championship lead for the time being, it does give me hope that we could have a proper title battle with the big four teams at least somewhat involved. Sure, this type of pace advantage will certainly not be a regular thing, a brand new track helped after all, but at least some reduced incompetence in the pits should be able to make up for that. Then again, Andretti and issues in the pits just belongs together, don't they? Before we move on to some karting action, I have to shout out IndyNXT graduate and former underrated F3 driver Kyle Collette. What a drive for a rookie in a mediocre at best kind of car. P12 might be easy to overlook on the results sheet, but when considering the car, this being his third ever race in the series, and experienced and highly rated teammate Santino Ferrucci struggling to have the same kind of impact, this really was a memorable weekend for the Brazilian. And this is before we even take into consideration that he did the job both with a solid qualifying and then crucially with good progress in the race as well. Now both Hauger and Collette have had at least one breakout kind of drive, at least on a small scale. Let's see if Mick Schumacher will get there eventually as well. At this stage, I think the Indy road course might be our best bet for that. RLL goes well there anyway, and it more closely resembles FIA Grade 1 tracks than these bumpy street circuits we've had so far. Anyway, before I leave you for this week, we gotta look at some excellent cup racing in our quick weekly karting report. The two big engine manufacturer series, the IEME Euro Series and the Rotax Euro Trophy, both kicked off their season this weekend, and since we might not always be able to keep up with them during the busy summer, I thought it would be important to do it now. Let's start with the IEME Euro Series, where in the juniors I want to highlight another fantastic female prospect that has been catching my eye for a while now. Sukmani Kera, now in her sophomore year in the juniors, has been fighting at the sharp end of whatever she's been racing throughout her career, and now she has secured her first European level podium after a race-long duel with eventual winner Ivan Gonzalez. Her consistent improvement year to year really is remarkable, and I'd definitely suggest you remember the name. In the seniors, we've had a story of two different races. We've had superstar Danny Caronini was absolutely dominating out front to finally get a win on the board again, while behind him a huge brawl for P2 played out for the entire race duration. This one really is a race to watch and easily my karting recommendation of the week. Way too much action to do justice in a few short minutes. Highlights for me included rookies Javier Broasca and Dan Alleman in P2 and P4 on the road respectively, as well as a sick charge from the back of the grid to P8 by Roxanne Lantinga. Once again, more female power in karting and no Champions of the Future Academy required. And over in Italy in the Rotax Euro Trophy, the juniors saw a dominant win from the ever-stunning Kai Clark, while my boy Danny Babicek managed to claim P2 amidst a pretty hectic DHR civil war with the likes of Emerson McAnder Uran. And all of that just for a penalty to ruin Clark's day and hand Babicek the win. Another box checked for the young, coincidentally a check in a so far rather successful 2026. Last but not least, the seniors were entirely decided by tyre gambles as a handful of drivers picked the wets and just blitzed the field. This made for a rather unusual podium. Nick Trebek, Tobias Norman and Jack West. You are forgiven for not knowing any of these drivers. I barely do myself if I'm honest. The star of the show was German Rotax frontrunner Austin Lee with a big boy charge to P5, aka best of the slick runners. Sadly, he and like half the well-running slick runners got disqualified for not respecting flag signal. All in all, a memorable round for a few individuals with a new high point in their careers, but otherwise a bit of a mess. And that was already it for the week. What were your highlights to watch? Let us know down in the comments along with all your other thoughts and opinions while we wait for this week's rather electric racing action. A special thanks goes out to our channel members, Freaky Lawyer and Vic Herman. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.